Welcome, everybody, to CSM Mastermind. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our Success Coaching Training Program. We are back for our monthly live webcast today talking about building and maintaining customer relationships virtually. This learning opportunity is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training with more than 36,000 students from nearly 100 different countries. Our skills development platform is making an impact across the globe. Whether you prefer self-paced learning, an instructor-led boot camp, an interactive workshop, or personalized weekly coaching program, our wide range of customer-focused programs and formats are tailored to meet the unique needs and learning preferences of everyone on your team. If you're eager to level up your customer-facing skills, don't miss out on these amazing learning opportunities that can truly transform your professional journey. Ashley has dropped a link to our program page and any coupons that we're offering right now in the chat. And you can find out more about all of our programs and workshops, as well as a bunch of other great content at successcoaching.co, including replays of all of our webinar series. This CSM Mastermind series is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success. No matter where you work, what your role is, or who your customers are, we've got you covered. Now, a few housekeeping items before we get going. This webinar is recorded and we'll be posting a replay and transcript on our website early next week. We encourage active participation, so please feel free to ask your questions using that Q&A button located at the bottom of your Zoom interface. Questions with higher upvotes will receive priority during the Q&A session. And then for our LinkedIn Live audience, you can also post your questions directly and they will be relayed to us. Thank you, Santana. To maintain a smooth discussion, please use the chat window exclusively for commentary while directing your questions to the Q&A window. All right. Enough of the logistics. There's a bunch of thought leadership out there along with loads of theories about how to deliver customer success. But in this series, we're going to focus on practical real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those who are actually doing customer success day in and day out. Now, to make that happen, we've invited three amazing panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are folks who are really damn good at what they do. And we're going to ask them to spill the beans on their experiences and their perspectives. So without further ado, I want our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, share a little bit about who they are and what they do, and let's get started as usual in alphabetical order with Chelsea.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Chelsea Loua. I'm based just out of Salt Lake City, Utah. I have been between customer success, account management, and sales in client-facing roles for over a decade now. Most recently, the last 6 years in customer success. And I now currently lead the mid-market customer success managers for the company I work for while maintaining an enterprise book of business. And a little bit about me, I just returned from a fun trip to Greece.
Nice. How long were you in Greece?
10 days. Not long enough. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
So much good food.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. I've wanted to go to Greece. And I've been talking to the wife about it. We're like, yeah, we can't do it for less than 2 weeks.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely wish that we were there for a full 2 weeks, but it was still lovely.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, Chelsea, thank you for making time for us today. Cole, you're up.
Thank you, Andrew. My name is Cole Jacquard. I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. I am the head of customer success for Real Data AI. My background is actually biology and worked in that field for a little bit. But I've been in the CS world for about 4 years now. And although my pathway into this career is a little unique and unplanned, I wouldn't change it for the world. My work, as many startup companies are, I wear a lot of hats. I'm involved in almost every process in some capacity, if it being sales, marketing, client management from point A to point B, development and growth of departments, et cetera, et cetera. Quick thing about Real Data. So we work in land-based aquaculture industry internationally, supporting profitability, sustainability, and scalability using AI and computer vision. So that's me.
So you're in a fishy business.
Very fishy business.
See, look at that. There you go. Another dad joke. Another dad joke. Fishy business. Yeah. Thank you, Cole. Thanks for joining us. And last but certainly not least, a second Canadian joining us today, Corinne.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'm so excited to be here. My name is Corinne Stanley. I'm an account manager at Dropbox, but a quick little bit about me so that you know who you're talking to, or rather, who's talking to you. I love dogs, dancing, and decor, as you can maybe tell from the sneak peek of my apartment here. I actually bought this place a year ago, my first place, so I'm very excited about that. I've been working in customer success and account management for the past like 10 years. And like many people, I did not start with aspirations of customer success. In fact, I didn't even know what it was. I started off getting my Bachelor of Education and thinking about teaching, and then found my way to customer success and just fell in love with it and wanted to learn everything about it. And I'm so excited to be here talking about building relationships, and especially in our growing virtual world, because I truly think that that is something that has made me the most successful in my career. So I'm so excited to be here with my fellow panelists and Andrew, and excited to get started.
Awesome. Awesome. So we have former finance person in Chelsea. We have a former biologist in Cole, and we have a former educator in Korea, or somebody who intended on getting into education. It just goes to show you can come from any world and get into customer success if you have the right tools and have the right mindset. Awesome. Once again, thank you all for your time today. We very much appreciate it. So now let's get to the topic at hand. In today's virtual business world, building and maintaining strong customer relationships can feel like navigating uncharted territory. Gone are the days of relying on face-to-face interactions and reading body language across a conference room table. Now we find ourselves connecting through screens, often struggling to create the same level of rapport and trust that once came naturally. Now, as customer-facing professionals, it's crucial that we adapt and find innovative ways to foster these relationships remotely. It's a core component to anyone and everyone in a customer-facing role. So my first question is, how do we effectively bridge the digital divide and create meaningful connections with our customers in this new virtual reality?
Perfect. I'll jump first on this one. And I think I can break it down into really two things, which is preparation and engagement. If you're not coming prepared to your meetings with your clients, they're not going to be engaged. You're going to be very robotic. So come prepared, have goals in mind, make sure that when you're having those discussions, you're bringing value for yourself and for your client base. Come with an agenda, make sure you're engaged in the meeting, eye contact, all that fun stuff. Because without those two variables, you're not going to be able to keep your client engaged and be able to reach the goals that you're trying to achieve with that meeting.
And you're going to probably have a hard time getting them back on the Zoom, back on the phone again, if they feel like you just wasted their time.
Exactly. Consistency is key. So if you're not being consistent with those two variables, it's going to be difficult to continue it on down the road in that relationship.
Yeah, for sure. Chelsea,
I love that idea of like prep as well. And just to kind of jump off of that one, for me, another thing that's really important is like getting myself in the zone a little bit, having that pre-call plan, but then also like get myself in the right headspace. Like this should be fun and engaging, and just the same as like if you were going to meet them in person. Like for some people, it might be just being quiet. For me, it's like a little bit of noise, some music, get my iced coffee, maybe do my hair so I feel good and like really feel ready to like have a presence. That definitely, goes into the prep for me as well. What about you, Chelsea?
I completely agree with that. There's nothing worse than getting on a call just to have a call. And our clients definitely feel that. So making sure that we're fully engaged and put like our phones away and we're focused on what we're doing with our clients, that I think helps a lot too. But as simple as just like turning your camera on, I think also is one of the biggest pieces for me. I try to always start my calls with my camera on so that then there's not that sometimes there is that little bit of awkwardness if someone doesn't want to turn their camera on, but then it's not, I feel like it helps the clients feel comfortable to turn their camera on if mine's already on.
Yeah, you have to turn your camera on. If you're doing a Zoom, you're doing a Teams, whatever your preference is, you have to turn your camera. So it doesn't matter if the customer never turns it on. You've got to turn it on, and you need to be prepared and ready to turn the camera on. So that means doing your hair, put on a nice shirt, whatever you need to do. So agree with you 100%. Yeah, I miss the days of being able to show up at a customer site and just shoot the shit with people. We can't do that. Or it's a lot harder to do. Or maybe that's just the top tier, but where you can show up at their office and have water cooler conversations. You've got to be prepared, right? You've got to be ready to maximize that time that you have with that customer. What have been, so for each of you, what have been some of your biggest challenges in transitioning to building customer relationships virtually? I mean, that's kind of that was always part of my approach, was hanging out and shooting the shit with people and,
Right.
And doing lunches and all that stuff. And that's been curtailed pretty significantly. So what have been some of your biggest challenges and how have you addressed those?
I think one of my biggest challenges is not being able to read the body language fully, because really we're only seeing from here up, right? So I'm a very big talker of my hands and like very emotional when I talk. And when people don't turn their cameras on, but also only being able to see so much of someone, it's very hard to read that body language. So having to be able to like listen to the tones in people's voices is something that I've really tried to hone in on and make a skill for myself. Because we are going to have clients that just don't turn their camera on, but also because we don't see a whole lot.
Right.
I feel like on that note, we've all talked about this when we were doing some prep, that like, that is a question that's going to come up. I've already seen it come up in the chat. Like, what do you do when people don't turn their cameras on? I think that's like one of the hugest barriers. And I think, and I kind of mentioned this when we were all chatting about this before, I think that there's like a really important balance to be struck. We don't want to kind of impose ourselves to be like, oh, can you please turn your camera on? Because we don't know what somebody's going through, what's going on. And that work-life balance is so important. However, I also am like, always like, okay, let's get on camera, and the way that I kind of go about that is just by doing it, leading by example. And like, we talked a little bit about that, like awkward kind of moment. I love a little awkward moment. It gives me something to talk about, potentially make a little joke about, depending on your audience. Like, okay, I'll just look at myself. No problem. I don't mind. Again, go based on your personality type of what works for you. But I think just kind of calling it out is one of the best things that you can do, or just kind of making light of it, keeping your camera on, even if everyone has their camera off, so that they can see you like actively listening. I do a lot of like nodding and like making kind of facial expressions, so that even if I can't see what they're doing, they can, yeah, see, just like that, Andrew. Even if I can't see them, they can see me and see that I'm engaged and I'm listening and I'm like zoned in. So that's definitely a challenge for sure still, but definitely something that I think, that's a good way to handle it.
Yeah, I totally agree, guys. And I think the whole reason we're talking about this, it's a new world now. Everything's virtual with these conversations. And one of the challenges I've seen is that not everybody's used to that. Some of the clients that we speak with, they're not used to jumping on Zoom calls or team calls. So it's building that comfort with a new client that may not be used to the virtual process. Majority of people can sit in a room and shoot the shit, but not everybody is used to having those Zoom calls, right? So it's building that comfort and working with them to find a way that we can have these virtual conversations and grow the relationship from client to consumer, and ensure that they're comfortable with it and build that trust and relationship over time.
Yeah, and not to troll you at all, Cole, but one of the things that I think is a good idea is actually to not blur your background and have stuff behind you that might capture the attention of folks. I mean, as you can see over my shoulder there, I got my guitars, I got a bunch of memorabilia. Back in my old place, I had a ton of sports memorabilia, and it always triggered a discussion. Always triggered somebody going, oh, that's really interesting, right? And I, more times than not, would get somebody on their camera, and I would, I had stuff on purpose by my my desk, like a Joe Montana signed football. Hey, have you seen this? Check this out, right? I'll show it. And then more times than not, I'd get one of them come back to me and say, oh yeah, take a look at this baseball, And so you're giving them a reason to engage with you. right? And you're showing them something, and so to do that though, you got to make sure you have, if you're working in your bedroom, your bed's made and you don't have a messy, you don't have a messy place. Now remember, all the mess can be on that side of the camera. You have no idea what's on that side of my camera right now, right? But
yeah, I totally agree. You just got to make sure you know what's behind you, because I had a funny story where I was doing a call from my parents' home, and my dad had thrown his clean laundry on the bed right before my call, and I didn't clue into it and did not blur my screen. And it was a conversation point, but it was, Cole, why have you not folded your laundry and put them away before talking to me? So
that's awesome.
Make sure you know your background.
I love that. A little bit of friendly razzing, or there's nothing like, if you've got a pet, sometimes it's like, oh, sorry, my dog's here. And it's like, oh my gosh, well, that's going to be the star of the show,
Of course. Yeah.
They're always good conversation starters.
Yeah.
The best.
And that's what you want. You want good conversation starters. You want to humanize yourself in the situation as much as possible. And honestly, I do that. I did that when I walked into somebody's office, right? The first thing I would do is I would scan the office and see. I remember one of the best relationships I had at a large financial institution was with this guy. The first time I met him, I walked into his office. He had nothing but golf stuff all over his office. And so we spent the first 45 minutes or an hour together just talking golf, right? Gave us something to kind of break down that awkwardness of a new introduction and talk about something that we were both passionate about, right? And that's my thing. I want people to be able to say, hey, what's that? Oh, yeah, that's my picture of the Beatles crossing Abbey Road. Oh, wow, that's cool, and check that out, starts a conversation, gets their barriers down, right?
I think to kind of touch on that too, I think what's nice is like when we were going into people's offices, we were seeing a lot about them and they weren't seeing much about us. And so I think where it's both sides now, it's a better, it helps the client relationship for them as well to get to know us.
Yeah, for sure. It tells them something about you. That's big, right? And that takes me actually to my next question. How do you establish trust and rapport with customers when face-to-face interactions are limited or they're non-existent? And this is, one of those ways is kind of humanizing that connection, right? I when my dog is not sleeping, I love having him walk around my office because he's a cool dog, and people always ask, "Hey, tell me about your dog," right? And I love seeing somebody's cat pop up on the keyboard and block the video and stuff like that. Okay, you're a pet lover. I like that.
I love that. I love that. And I think one of the things for me, just throughout all of this, building rapport in any situation, like virtual or not, but specifically in virtual, I feel like authenticity for me is number one. I don't know about anybody else, but when I first started out, it took a little while to really figure out how to approach conversations with C-suite level. And I was really trying to, I think when I first started, I was nervous that they were going to be like, oh, she's a young girl. They're not going to take me seriously. And so I tried to be this very professional, polished, person. And it didn't really click. It wasn't me, and then as soon as I felt like I could just be myself, and that really came through and it worked. And I was like, oh, they are taking me seriously because I know what I'm talking about. And I think it comes off even better when you just lean into who you are, you show a little bit of yourself, because I think that vulnerability in and of itself allows them to then feel comfortable with you and to want to open up to you. To me, that authenticity part and just the backgrounds, and you're sharing a little story about yourself that happened that day. Maybe it was funny. Maybe it was something even about the weather. I think that just opens it up to make them be like, oh, okay, cool. This is just a person, not a salesperson or not somebody that's, trying to get something from me, so that's definitely something that I try and live by.
I think it's also super important to, and this is both just a tip in general, but a strategy to establish rapport is getting on the call early. You always want to be on your calls early. Right? This idea of booking back-to-back meetings is foolish. Besides the fact that you need some time for your mind to reset, being able to get on your calls early, right? So you should always be getting on a conference call that you have scheduled 5 minutes early. And you know what? If you have the opportunity for a customer to hop on early, start chatting about anything but business. But also at the beginning of a conversation, I think it's important that you have some icebreakers. Like you said, Corinne, you humanize things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Like in any meeting that I run, I always try to account for at least a little bit of time at the beginning to have those humanizing conversations, because how can you really trust somebody when you're having a robotic call where we're going through a list and then that's all? I'm very lucky with the client base that we have very, very close interactions. We're talking on a weekly basis in recurring meetings, weekly, bi-weekly, and then talking through Teams or whatever on a regular basis as well. So it's really good to build those relationships, but it's so important to have that time in those meetings, even when you're busy, to be able to have those icebreakers or just casual conversations beforehand, because it builds that trust. And like Corinne had said, it opens up the trust to share things, be more open, helps you understand the goals they want to have, challenges and pain points they're having. And it just builds that relationship so much better.
I always assume 5 minutes at the beginning of it. Every agenda has 5 minute buffer built into the beginning for that sort of, back and forth.
Definitely. I completely agree with that. I think another big piece with that, though, is remembering your conversation from the previous time. Also helps build that trust and relationship. So being able to talk like, oh, how was your kid's soccer game last week? Like, how did that go? Or just bringing up something personal, but then also acknowledging what you spoke about business wise and continuing to follow up on that.
Yeah, 100%. And just a reminder, folks, you got questions, put them in the Q&A. We'll get to those in probably another 10, 15 minutes at the most. So to that point, to that end about remembering and understanding and reviewing, this is part of the prep, reviewing that conversation from last time. We were going to talk about some technology. Thought we were going to mention technology, but I don't see it on our list right here. But I, even before Gong, even before update.ai, what I would do, standard operating procedure, every single Zoom meeting was default to record. We recorded every single one. And then we would take that recording and we'd go to one of these. Now they have AI transcriptions. I can get that transcribed if it was a half-hour meeting for about $3. It's about 10 cents a minute by automated transcription. But what I found, the reason why we instituted that, now we use update.ai, which is a great tool for that. It sends me a summary, and writes up those key things. So all those things that Chelsea, you mentioned, you got to remember for next time. That's just kind of standard operating procedure for us, because that allows me to really focus on my conversation and not worry about taking every single note, right? Because I can go back and I can watch it, or I can go back and I can read the transcription.
That's so key. Honestly, it's so key for me, like not having to take physical notes. And because I think, and I love Gong. I don't know if anybody uses Gong. I love it. I think it's so great to be able to just focus on the call as if you were in person and not worry, especially when, sometimes we do have a ton of meetings in a day and you're, by the time you get to the end of the day, you're going to do your follow-ups and you're like, okay, what exactly what was the next steps for this? So I definitely think leveraging the technology that we have access to, even like ChatGPT, put that call brief in ChatGPT. It's going to help you save time with your follow-ups, make you more efficient, and make sure that you're not missing anything. And honestly, like one of the biggest things for me too is to literally be able to be zoned in and to be making eye contact, right? Looking at the camera, and leveraging that technology. It's there, it's growing. We're in this virtual world, and like we can be the experts in that. Because I also think something that we haven't really touched on yet is that so much of the virtual world is like email. So how are we bringing value with our email outreach as well as our calls? And I think one way to do that is making sure that when we have a call, especially when there was a lot of calls to action, that we've got a very good follow-up that's going to be very clear and let them know, okay, here's what we talked about. Here's the next steps for everyone involved. And then that way you again can then follow up on the next call or get your next call booked. Sometimes that's what we're looking to do, is get that next call booked. So I definitely love the leveraging of the technology that we have to kind of help make our lives easier and help make us more engaged on the calls.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We have a very similar strategy here. We're building out an agenda beforehand on recurring meetings, at least 24 hours before, if not longer, giving it to the internal team to give any feedback if anything wants to be added to the conversation. And typically, if it's not a recurring meeting or something's important, we're also sharing a high-level agenda with the client beforehand to add anything that they'd like to add. I personally use Firefly for recording of the videos. It's very good with accents and stuff. That was one thing we ran into, where accents weren't being picked up and it was misspeaking for them. Also gives an overview of the conversation as well at the end, and it gets put in our agenda for anybody to look at. And then the same thing as Corinne said, we're sending a follow-up that's very organized and consistent, with next steps and what we went over to the client immediately after and everybody else that was involved. So that consistency, and long-term tracking of what's going on is so important.
Yeah, that follow-up. I mean, you talked about earlier, Cole, the importance of being prepared, right? When we talk about there's three pieces to every customer interaction. We teach this in our training. There's the actual interaction itself, but there's the prep, right? And then there's the follow-up, right? And you have to get all three of them right. And that follow-up is super important. So Chelsea, you mentioned earlier about the body language, reading customers. So what strategies have you found effective in reading customers, understanding their needs and concerns through virtual communication?
Yeah, I think a tone of voice is one of the biggest pieces that I really try to, and that goes with the technology as well. Then I'm able to like fully listen because I'm not as distracted trying to take every single thing down in my notes. So tone of voice, but also in the words that they're speaking, and if there's some hesitation. Another big piece that I always try to practice is asking the hard questions instead of like hoping that the client's going to bring it up or to ask it in a roundabout way. Just being direct. Obviously, knowing your audience, you don't want to be like fully blunt if someone's not receptive to that. But I think being direct in a professional manner is very much appreciated and helps the relationship with the client, especially in a virtual world, because they can't see my body language either. So they don't know how I'm feeling. So making sure also with my tone of voice, I'm using fluctuations in it when it's necessary, but also like reading the room just in a virtual world.
That's why I like my standing desk, because I can be like,
yes,
love that answer right there, baby. All right.
There you go.
Really sparring over there. I love it.
Exactly.
I love that, Chelsea. I absolutely love that. Like, nothing to add other than I just completely agree with you. And I think that that's such an important call out, is that, we are trying to make sure that our clients are successful. And how we do that is by asking those hard questions and I think building that rapport is what makes us able to ask those questions and not have them be like, whoa, where are you coming from? Right. They know that we're there to help them and that's, our success is their success. So I love that. I love that answer.
I think also with that, like setting the stage for it as well and saying like, I want to be completely transparent as possible with you and letting them know that so that it's not just like, oh, where did that question come from? Like, wasn't expecting that. I think that kind of goes with like how we were talking about the cameras before too. I think there was a question about like having the cameras freeze, which happens. It happens a lot. Recently, it's happened to me a lot lately. So I have had to ask like, we're going to have to turn our cameras on, but I want to make sure that everyone still is engaged. To do so, like I want to keep the conversation open and flowing and not just be talking at you guys. And I think that's helpful when there's no cameras.
Yeah.
Andrew, you look like you're going to say something.
So do any of you set the expectation about cameras on before the meeting as part of the agenda? Ooh. So Cole, you talk about prep and sending an agenda. Have you thought about putting a line in that mail that you send out? Here's our agenda. here's, please try and have your cameras on so we can have a conversation. Yeah, here's some of the questions that we're going to be going over during the conversation as part of your preparation?
Internally within the company, we do that 100%. Externally, we don't. And one of the reasons for that is with our client base and the people that we're working with, some of the times we're having conversations with people that are down working with the fish, working in the tanks, where they may not be joining in the call on their computer. They may be on the phone, still engaged, still involved, but may not be capable. So if it's possible, we try to get them to put them on, but there's also that understanding that, sometimes they're not in the environment that they can. So it's more just understanding who we're talking to and what their capabilities are of doing that or not.
I want to get to questions here in a couple more minutes, but I have one last question for you. And this is kind of more of a tactical kind of skills-based question. How important is active listening in this whole process of ensuring that your virtual interactions with customers are focused, purposeful, and you're actually creating that connection?
Oh, I think sorry, I'll just jump in. This is like one of my biggest pieces that I, even in person, try to acknowledge and be part of. Obviously those tools that we all have now with Gong and OpenAI, all of those help so much. But I think also repeating back to the client what you hear, like what I hear you saying is that you want this and this to happen. That's a big piece of active listening. But then they also know that like it helps the relationship. It just is a full circle of I am hearing you. But it's the biggest piece to having a trusted relationship with the client.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more with that. I'm like I said before, I'm a huge active listener. Sometimes I'm like, okay, stop nodding so much. What is wrong with you? But I really do feel that it's important, and you want people to know that you're engaged, that this is important to you, that you're not just like checking your WhatsApp or whatever it might be while you're talking to them, or you're not reading off Slack or whatever. I also think, like, for me, in my role as an account manager, and even in my past roles as CSMs, discovery is like a huge part of it. And I think for most CSMs, that's a huge piece. And it's sometimes a very challenging piece because it sometimes feels like an interrogation. And so being an active listener means that you're able to ask them questions and just be like, I'm very curious, and I'm very curious to learn more about your process and where your, pain points are. So I'm going to be asking you some questions, and that active listening really helps. Like what Chelsea mentioned with mirroring. Mirroring is a huge part of that. And being able to ask jump off questions to dig deeper into their pain to understand then what we can do and how we can kind of help. So I think that those go hand in hand, really. The active listening leads into the discovery and back to the active listening. So I definitely couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Corinne and Chelsea there. Not much more to add than, it's so important to be listening, asking those open-ended questions, digging more into the things they're talking about, make them comfortable, get them to talk about more and more, but what they're talking about, it minimizes the amount of assumptions we need to make, and also to ensure that we're not misunderstanding what they're saying, especially if there's a language barrier. It's important to dig deeper in and get them to speak more about what they're talking about to ensure that we're on the same page about what we're talking about.
Yeah, discovery is huge. And actually in our some of our content, we talk about taking a consultative approach, which is asking good questions, asking the right questions, and active listening. And I always go back. I always mention one of my favorite books, Never Split the Difference, by Chris Voss, which is an awesome book. It was written as a book for salespeople to negotiate, but it really is. It embodies all of the things that, if you are in a customer-facing role, you need to be able to do, right? Connect with people, ask good questions, be able to respond with the right attitude, the right follow-up questions, things like that. That type of what he's put in this book helps you make a connection with folks, and it's actually part of our recommended reading. And no, we are not getting any sort of cut of that. I'm just a huge fan of that book and what Chris is has written. If anybody out there knows Chris, contact me because I would love to get him on the webinar series. All right. So how about this? How about we take some questions? Sound good? So just a reminder to my participants, if you see a question there that you want to jump in on, hit that answer live button. All right. Let me refresh here. All right. Our first question comes from Michael. Michael, good to see you. Thanks for joining us again. Michael asks, say you have the customer's main team and manager fully engaged, but not the director or C-level persona. How do you get them engaged when they notoriously ignore any outreach? And it looks like, Corinne, you want to jump in on this out of the gate.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a tough one. And I face it all the time in my role, like all the time. We are always trying to have those multi-threaded relationships to be able to talk to the C-suite and have that relationship. And it can be very difficult. I think one of the things that has helped me get to that point is by really focusing on the relationship with my champions. And making it worth their while to have their C-suite person join the call, even if it's for 15 minutes at like an executive business review. Because one of the things that I think is so important is being like, let's show all of the amazing things that you've done. You know, we've been working together a year, you're renewing, and let's talk about all of the money that you've saved the company, all of the time that you've saved, how much you've been able to implement, and the success that you've seen. And I think that if you kind of work with your champion on things like that, and you guys work together on even the presentation sometimes, then they're like, oh yeah, I really want them to come. And you're much more likely to have that C-suite level person join because their employee or colleague has said, you know, I'd really love if you could join, rather than me just being like, hi, me again. So I think like it just goes into that, again, that just relationship building and showing that value and making it worth their while. So it's not just about me.
And you mentioned the word value, and I agree with you 100%. You need to show the value so that this executive that is your key stakeholder that signed off on the contract looks like the smartest person on that call for believing in you, right? But the other piece of that is providing value. It's not just about showing the value that they've achieved, but I think it's really important in order to build and maintain these relationships virtually that you're providing value. I mean, every time I get on a call with you, right, I want value. That's why I freaking hate the when people use the term, oh, let's just get together for a check-in. No, what is a check-in? No, that to me feels like you are just, the check is you checking a box, right? Okay, I talk to them.
Yeah, and the C-suite too. Like it's very difficult. They're very busy people, right? So it's hard to get them in a check-in, nor would they want to, right? Mm-hmm. So it's build out things that they want to be involved in. So hosting virtual events. So we're working on right now building out workshops. So like a biannual workshop where we just go over past, present, and future. What have we accomplished? Seek feedback from what we're doing. Celebrate the milestones that we've achieved and what we're trying to achieve. Get them into something that they want to be involved in, again, make them look like the smartest one in the room, right? So having those meetings that brings value to them, something they want to come to, but brings value to everybody that's involved in the conversation.
Exactly. But that, Corinne, back to your suggestion, this is where your internal champion, it can be incredibly valuable. Also why you don't want to be single-threaded, right? You want to, even if that internal champion is somebody at the lowest level, that they're an end user, they're an individual contributor, you know, they have a hell of a lot more insight than you ever will, right? What's keeping your boss up at night? What are the things that they're celebrating about what we're doing? Leverage that. So important.
I was just going to say that exactly. Lean on your champion. Ask them those questions. Like, what would your C-level executive like to see on this call? What are they looking for? And just tell them, like, I want to be prepared. I want them to be engaged for us to continue to move forward. I know their engagement is important. So just tying it all together.
Yeah,
honestly, just a little side note on this as well. One of the things that I love about this webinar is like, I'm already seeing the chat and I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Like, be creative, be agile, like listen to others. Like, it's not one way or nothing, right? Like, I've already seen so many in here and I'm like, gotta note that down. I hope we're getting these notes, because I'm like, that I've never tried that. I'm going to use that. I love that. Somebody mentioned, like, ask them to turn their cameras on for intros, but if they don't, that's no worries. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing that on my next call for sure. So like being creative and like just, networking and getting other people's ideas, trying new things. Maybe they won't work, but maybe they will, so love that.
So I have found that a big, huge help of getting people to turn their cameras on is putting that in the invite, right? Is saying, hey, it'd be great if everybody had their camera on. So at least they're prepared. They don't have an excuse. And people will always come up with excuses. Mm-hmm. For me, it can be particularly challenging when I'm teaching. When I'm so when we do boot camps, everybody turns their camera on. But I've done private coaching programs for hundreds of people, and in a company, and it can be really challenging when 5 of the 25 people you have in that cohort only turn their camera on. But like you said before, you just start with the camera on, keep it on. Awesome. Michael, thank you again for your question, and good to see you as usual at these events. Corinne, if you can hit the done button for his, so he can. All right. So our next question comes from Adam. Adam asks, "What CSM tools could you 3 not live without, and why?" Apparently, they don't want to hear from me. They just want to hear from you. So, what CSM tools can you live without, or could you not live without, and why?
I would say Gainsight for sure. I absolutely love Gainsight. I love the tasks, the CTAs, the success plans. It integrates with Salesforce and Gong, and it helps me so much. And the timeline itself, like everything about it, is just so helpful for me to continue to like stay on top of my tasks and not forget to follow up with something. That's my biggest one. I won't go through all 3 all at once because I'm sure everybody else has some other ones.
Corinne, what about you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think you guys already heard it. I'm a Gong girl. I love it. I love Gong. I do. I love Gong. I think, and I love Gainsight, and I love tools that talk to each other. That's great. I love integrations to make my life easier. I don't know about you guys. I loathe admin tasks. I truly do. Anybody? I know I have a couple like coworkers on this. They're like, yeah, she does. I like talking. I'm like, okay, let's get on the call. That's the best part. I'm like, God, I've got to do all these admin tasks. No. So I like anything that's going to help make my life a little bit easier, work smarter, So Gong and Gainsight are 2 huge ones, but I'm curious, Cole, what's your fave?
Yeah, Fireflies, as I'd mentioned, love that one for tracking things. We use Jira. That's a good one. NetSuite we've just started using, which is nice, which goes to kind of what you were talking about, where it just kind of connects everything. In the early stages, when we first started off, everything was going into Confluence and everything was being built out into a document. And, I love my standard operating procedures, but it gets to a point as you grow in a company that you need to expand upon that. So it's nice having something like NetSuite where you put all the information in there. Good for marketing tools, good for tracking information. So those are kind of the main 3 that we're utilizing.
You know what? Another one that I just thought of, we just started using a couple months ago, is Guru. And I wasn't sure about it at first because I was like, man, another thing that we have to like go to find, but it actually has condensed my looking in multiple different places into one space. And it has been so helpful. And I actually really like it now.
Awesome. And I've already mentioned mine. Update.ai is a great tool. Love Update.ai. Awesome. Adam, thank you for the question. Our next question comes from Thomas. Thomas asks, sometimes, hopefully very rarely, you're not a good personality fit with a customer. You can't seem to get rapport no matter what. As a manager, how would you want your employees to come to you and productively request a switch? What would you want your direct reports to bring to that conversation? Chelsea, looks like you want to jump in on this.
Yes, I had to recently do something similar like this. So that's why I wanted to jump in on it. This happens. It's not anything against skills. I mean, sometimes it is, right? Of course. But when it's like a personality thing and you're just not getting anywhere, it is so important to bring that to your manager so that we can make the switch before it gets worse. We don't want that to turn into a churn or the customer being so unhappy that like we can't come back from that. But coming to your manager, letting them know like what you have done to try and overcome that, I think is the first thing. But also just not being nervous to come to your manager, telling them like, I understand that this is something that we don't always want to do, but I also feel like this is for the benefit of the client. And we want to be able to maintain that client relationship. But knowing your customer, knowing where they're at, why it's not a personality fit, and just knowing that you've done everything you possibly can, and then relaying that information to your manager.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Corinne, you got something to add?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, everybody would be so lucky to have Chelsea as their team lead because you can tell how supportive she is. And that's so key. As a CSM, as an account manager, it's so key to have that leadership that's going to support you and listen to you. I think, and it goes into another question that I don't even see here anymore, but about personalities and different personality types and what if people aren't big talkers. And I think these things are so intertwined. And obviously, as you can maybe tell, I've got a big personality, right? That's not for everybody.
No.
And not for everybody. You know, I don't get it. But one of the things that I really try and do is though I'm gonna be me, I really want to make sure that I am not like forcing people out of their comfort zone. If they're like, you know what, I'm a D style personality, I want the facts. I don't want to hear about your day. I don't want to, that I'm not like, oh, well, I have to do this because this is how to build rapport. What we want to do is make sure that we're keeping our authenticity, but also like understanding what the client wants. And if the biggest value to them is having a 30-minute call in 15 minutes, let's do it because that's what's going to build that relationship. They're going to be like, okay, I want to talk to her. And again, sometimes there are situations where, you know, it's just not going to work. You want to prevent that churn. You have a wonderful manager like Chelsea. That's, you know, the way to go. But sometimes it's just about reevaluating and understanding what it is that's important to this client and then trying to like fit yourself into that and show them like, okay, maybe they're really data driven. I'm going to just pull up some data and show them that and see how it goes, you know? So I think that's one of the things that I try and do, especially as being a very chatty I type.
You need to read the room, right? You need to, I mean, virtually read the room. And this is also where your internal champion is incredibly beneficial, right? What does your boss care about? My boss cares just about data. Or no, you know, my boss likes to shoot shit. My boss plays golf. My boss, whatever. I mean, this is so much G2 from folks that are direct reports that once again aren't going to make a decision, but can influence it or help you figure out how to get it influenced in the right way.
Yeah, I like to think of the CSM role as like a chameleon. And we always kind of have to like change and adapt to the environment that we're in to be able to like get the client to be successful. So that's the way that I always look at being a CSM.
I'm stealing that one. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. It's so true. You know what else is a good thing? Sorry, I just thought of this, is that sometimes one of the things I love to do is to invite other members from other departments onto my meetings. I never shy away from being like, oh, you want to hear more from this client? Come on the call with me. First of all, it makes them feel special. Second of all, they get to see a new person, a new style. And sometimes it's just like a little bit of breath of fresh air. Sometimes you uncover more about them. And then that helps you with going forward in your interactions. And it kind of helps them have multi-threaded connections. And then maybe you can have multi-threaded connections as well.
So true. Very, very helpful.
All right, Chelsea, you hit that done button for me. By the way, just a reminder, we do go till 1:15. So we'll keep answering questions.
Oh, nice.
As long as we can. So if you can stick around, stick around. Our next question comes from anonymous attendee who always seems to crop up here. How often do you talk to clients? I understand that at risk demands more attention, but how do you balance being supportive, compared to overly communicating? And Cole, you already mentioned you talk to your most of your clients once a week, right?
Yeah. So I can jump right on this one. So typically what we do during onboarding is we'll schedule a recurring meeting, typically during the early stages. This is a weekly meeting that we have. And then once we've converted from trial and move into a more extended relationship, we'll speak with them and either do bi-weekly, monthly, depending on their needs. One of the other things we add during the beginning is we add some form of direct communication. So either Teams chat, WhatsApp, whatever they use. Again, it's their comfort with technology, whatever they want to use, we'll adapt. So if they want to email us, they can email us. If they want a way to send me a message immediately, we're able to do that. It's really adapting to their needs. But our market in general is very, very high touch. We're very close communication with them, which I enjoy personally. It's good for me to build the relationships, but can also make it very busy.
Yeah, you want to meet them where they're at as much as possible.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think, oh, sorry, go ahead, Chelsea.
You go right ahead.
Oh, okay. I totally agree with that. I think that's one of those questions where it's going to depend. It's totally going to depend because as you know, and with CSMs, like there are all different types of books of business. There are all different types of softwares. There's all different types of products. So it's really going to depend. I would say that without being too vague, one of the things that I really like to do is to ask my clients, what is the cadence that they prefer? Now, we are still going to have the mandatory touch points that we have to have, but I absolutely am not going to be like, well, we have to talk once a month, whether you like it or not. Like, I'm not going to do that. I just can't. That's not because what we're ultimately trying to do is always thinking about what is the client going to get the most value from? How are we going to show value? And if they say, you know what, I'm the type of person where if I need something, I'll be communicative. I'll reach out. Let's just put quarterlies in. And then, if we need from there, let's do it ad hoc. I'm like, absolutely, let's do that. And I think like sometimes during an intro call where you're meeting them for the first time or a kickoff, kind of going through working style a little bit, perhaps saying to them, a lot of people have young kids. A lot of people have this and that. Sometimes they don't respond right away. So kind of just even being like, this is how I work. This is my cadence. I'd love if we could set up these monthly touch points, but let me know what would be of value to you. And then again, you get a little bit more from them. You understand who they are, how they work, what they like. So I think I really do think it's about like asking the client what would be the best for them.
That conversation needs to be standard part of your conversation in every intro call.
Yeah.
How are we going to communicate? Right?
Yeah.
It's communicate. How am I going to communicate with you? And then what's our escalation path? If I need to, those should be part of every single intro call.
Agreed.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. I think another thing is to remember to check in on that every so often as well. Like every quarter or every so often of just saying like, is this cadence still working for you? I also always give my suggestion on how often I would like to meet before asking them how often they would like their cadence. I just say like my suggestion for where you currently are and where you want to be would be bi-weekly or monthly, but also in between that, if it is only quarterly calls, still having a communication flow of like, here's a monthly newsletter or here are the changes that have happened go on for the last month or so. So still having the communication line open, but knowing that you have your cadence set up quarterly is, I think, as well, okay. But making sure that like you don't leave your call without setting your next call.
I also think you need to be prepared to adjust based off of where they're at in their customer journey as well.
Yes.
We're going to talk a lot more at the beginning, and then once we reach steady state, we don't need to talk as much. So what do you prefer? Right. I was talking to my key stakeholder on a weekly basis when we were right in the middle of implementation. And then once we went live, it was every couple of weeks. And then once we were fully adopted, it was once a quarter, or maybe twice a year.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, anonymous attendee, if that's your real name, thank you for the question. Our next question comes from Moises. Moises asks, what can you share about clients' privacy when it comes to recording our virtual meetings for internal use or us to summarize our meeting afterward? Would you ask for permission to have the virtual meeting recorded? If they say no, what would you do? So in the last 5 years of that I've recorded our meetings, I've only had 2 where they've asked me not to record. I don't know about the rest of you.
I don't think I've had any, but I always disclose that as well. Like in Fireflies, it comes up as a participant, and I think it's called Fred. So we'll say, oh, by the way, this is our recording thing. It just tracks all the notes. And like I said, we haven't had any issues with anybody.
Zoom tells you that it's recording. I mean, when you log in, it says recording, and you have to hit a modal to get past that.
Yeah.
I would say I've had a few instances with it. I think just depends on the industry you're working in and the verticals. I've had some where, NDAs were super tight and they do not like recording. I always respect that. I think that's like number one. Security is like the most important thing. However, I think it doesn't come up as much as you would think it would. And I think, as people are as the world is changing and becoming more towards a recording and AI focus, there are a lot of those checkpoints, like everybody mentioned, right? You have to click off on it and everything. I do find, though, it is funny when you are asked not to record and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, hang on, let me get my pen and paper. Like I gotta really write this stuff down. And I think one of the things to do as well is just, if you get down to like why, sometimes they just are like, oh, we're not supposed to record. And sometimes that's not even really the truth of it. You can ask them like, oh, is there a particular reason? Get down to the bottom of it. Because sometimes people just think that they're like violating a privacy term and it's not actually. So I would say like definitely always respect their wishes, but also sometimes dig a little bit deeper and ask like, oh, okay, is there like a team we could talk to? It's just really nice for us to be able to knowledge transfer this way to make sure that everybody is up to date on, our conversations.
Yeah, I do have a handful.
When you're communicating with your customer, you can say, hey, by the way, our call is going to be recorded. I mean, on my Calendly invites, it says, hey, when we get together, our call is going to be recorded. So you're setting the expectation, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's explaining it too, right? Like I think Marie made a good point in the chat there. It's like explain why you're doing it.
It's just for my use. It's so I can
for my use. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's so I can concentrate on you. I mean, you spin it. You can spin it. I'm doing this so that I can really understand. We can have a conversation. I don't have to worry about taking notes.
Yep.
Sorry, Chelsea, you were going to say something.
No, you're totally fine. I mean, basically the same thing. I have a handful of clients that ask me not to record, and that's fine. I just make note of it for any future, and I don't invite like the gong recorder and things like that. But just understanding like why, and sometimes it is like a privacy thing with government entities, or I had a client that they were going through like a merger and acquisition, and they just said that the organization asked them not to have anything recorded. So just respecting that and continuing to move on. And I always have like Gainsight actually has a plugin with Zoom, so I always have like the timeline set up anyway. So just being prepared just in case and continue to move on. But I think, like you said, like set the expectation. And then usually it's not a problem.
Exactly. Awesome. Moises, thank you for the question. Our next question comes from Pamela. Pamela asks, how can you scale communication support when you're responsible for a lot of accounts, 50 to 100?
This is a difficult one. I've had large books in the past, and things have changed, and I haven't had a super large book in a little while. So I'm trying to remember exactly how I did it, but basically just like CCing or BCCing everyone on the communications, but you want them to still be as individualized as possible, or like keep the wording so that it's not like, this is a targeted ad. You don't want that feeling in that. So it's important. Yes, you can use like ChatGPT to come up with like a time or like some kind of template, but also personalizing that so that it still sounds like it's coming from you, I think is one of the biggest pieces, because you don't want it to come across as like this is an automatic email, because it's still important to make those connections.
Well, one of the hacks that we used to do is we would tell people, and this is before ChatGPT, and maybe you don't have a customer marketing tool, create a Google Doc that has a bunch of copy. Right. And you write it, but you write it once.
Yep.
And then it's copy and paste. Right. And you are personalizing it when you're doing the paste. right? Maybe you throw something in there about something you remember. Hey, by the way, how was your kid's soccer game? I wanted to now communicate, and I want to remind you that we released this new feature, blah, 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 blah. So it doesn't remove the manual nature of it, but you what you're doing is you're at least driving some efficiency, so you can handle 50 or 100 clients at once.
One thing that I'm like just starting to venture into myself and trying to get more comfortable with is doing little like video emails as well. Sometimes, and I have a big book of business. I have over 100 accounts, and sometimes it's very difficult to get them to respond. Everybody's busy, and you're trying to meet new people. Sometimes just clicking on a little video and they're like, oh, this is a real person. Okay, maybe I'll respond, can go a long way. I was doing like a sales training, and I had a question or a comment or something, and I sent it in, and then they responded with the video, and I loved it because I was like, oh, they're conveying tone. They're answering my question. I feel like we're talking, and it worked really well. So it's definitely something that I'm trying to get into, because also, I don't know about you guys, but for me, just doing a quick little record takes like 20 seconds versus being like, okay, let me sit down and type out this email. Again, know your clients, I guess, and know if that's something that they'll, and a lot of these, softwares that you use to do the recordings, you can actually see click rates, which is very helpful as well. So you can see if they opened it, you can see how long they watched it so that you can then follow up, and so that's something that I'm starting to think about as well.
So do you use like Loom?
I use Dropbox Capture.
Okay.
Yes,
of course. Of course, you would use your own product. That makes sense.
Not to plug it, but it works amazing. Everyone should get it.
Okay. Yeah, our customer success team uses Loom. We send out little Loom videos, especially when somebody says, I'm having a hard time finding this. Oh, here's where you find it. That was great.
Loom is good. I've also used like just the Zoom one as well. There's so many out there now.
Yeah, exactly.
So try it out. It adds a little flair.
I like that. I haven't thought about doing that. I actually really like that.
Yeah.
That's a super cool idea.
Yeah. Cool. Chelsea, anything to add?
No, I think
you're good. Okay.
No, I think you guys.
Pamela, thanks for your question. I hope you guys can't hear my gardener in the background who shows up at the worst time every Wednesday. Our next question comes from Miles. Miles asks, what I worry about is the reverse problem. Cameras are on, but somebody lacks bandwidth, so video, and sometimes audio freezes to the point of distraction. Okay, we touched on this a little bit. At that point, I asked, turn cameras off. Is there etiquette or protocol for that?
I don't think that there's an etiquette or protocol. I think that it's just like acknowledging what's happening and just saying, like, obviously we want to keep this engaging, but to continue to move forward, we also want to make sure we can continue our call. So let's go ahead and turn our cameras off. That's what I would go with. I don't think that it's rude to say, like, turn your camera off. I mean, obviously say it in a polite way. But I think that everyone would appreciate that, because there's nothing worse than like the or someone like frozen in a weird way to throw the meeting off
with that really awkward face. Oh,
yes.
Look at that!
It's always the most
everybody's
awkward
taking
thing.
screenshots so they can send it to all their peers. Hey, look at Andrew's O face over here. This is awesome, right? No, it's I actually when I've done trainings and I know there's somebody that has bandwidth issues, what I ask is I say, hey, to kick the meeting off, can you turn your camera on so everybody can see and we can do introductions, and then turn your camera off, right? Because I understand you have bandwidth issues. And by the way, if you go into, as part of your prep, if you go into that and say, hey, listen, here's our agenda, I would like to have cameras on as much as possible. If somebody has a bandwidth issue, and if somebody has actually read the agenda and has a bandwidth issue, they're going to mention that. And you can say, okay, just like what I said, hey, can you start with the camera on and then turn it on?
I think for me, another thing, like, not that there's a specific etiquette or protocol, but for me personally, the thing that I always think is that if I'm coming onto the call and this is my call, I've scheduled it, I own this account, I own this call. And so I'm responsible for making sure that everybody knows what's going on and that there's no like, oh, should we do this? Should we do this? Like, that's my job. So that nobody gets that weird, like, oh, like it's uncomfortable, it's awkward, or people don't know what to do. That's why the pre-call plan is so important. That's why setting up like an upfront contract is so important. That's why if you run into technical difficulties, there's somebody there being like, do not panic. Do not panic, everybody. This is what we're going to do. We're going to problem solve live. This is fine. Or, call in from your phone. It's no big deal. Let's just keep the convo going. So I think like just being that like that narrator of the call can be so important because it puts others at ease that they don't have to be the one to handle it. So just keep your calm, find a solution. And if there is none, if everyone's dropped off, no big deal. We will reschedule. What's everyone's calendar looking like?
That's the right attitude. You have to go in with the mindset. If this is your call, it's just like, this is my webinar.
Exactly.
Right? I'm here to facilitate this conversation. So you need to approach every call that you put on the calendar for your customers with the same mindset. You are there to facilitate the conversation. You are the MC. Anybody else want to add? Miles,
No.
Thank you for the question. Our next question comes from Elaine. Elaine asks, what tips would you give it to a digital CSM to engage or keep engagement? I think we kind of touched on this, but Corinne, you got anything to add?
Honestly, that was the one that I was going to say. I think use the video, try it out because it can be really hard. I think being in like tech touch or being more a digital CSM, you just have to get creative with it and find different ways to connect and really show your personality without, having to get on calls sometimes or, what have you. Try out the video, see if it works. Yeah. That would be
what's key is understanding what's going to work with that particular customer. Exactly. I have a chief customer officer that I've known for 15 years. She's at her fourth company now. And I know that if I've got to communicate with her, I can send her an email with detail, but the best way to get her attention is to text her.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, I sent you the details in email, but blah, blah, blah. Can you look at this? Yada, yada, yada. And she'll be sitting in a board meeting and she'll respond.
Okay.
Right? 'Cause
knowing your audience is so key.
Exactly. Yeah. Knowing your
100%.
Exactly. Yeah.
I also think too, one of the things, if you work in a company as a digital CSM where you have SDRs or business development representatives, ask them what they do, because are so many studies on email communication, subject lines, keeping emails really short and sweet. So like leverage the experience of other departments where there are going to be common goals in what you're doing. I love the cross-departmental collaboration. And I think SDRs and CSMs and salespeople and marketing
communications. Yeah, for sure.
We all have, skills and experience to leverage with each other. So like ask them what's working best, what are getting the most click rates, and then replicate it.
Yeah. And we're all after the same objective, right? Growing the company, keeping it healthy. So
exactly. Utilize the tools around you.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you, Elaine, for that question. Corinne, if you could hit the done button for me.
Sure.
Thank you. Our next question, another question from Michael. Michael asks, how do you handle customer communication when your manager is pushing for as much engagement as possible and making calls a checkbox activity? This is a tough one. I personally have faced this before, and it was frustrating. I'm like, this is not what the customer is asking for. That's usually what my response would be. This is not what the customer is asking for. The customer is not asked for this, and what you're pushing me to do is going to alienate me with the customer. So do you want good quality communication, or you want me to alienate the customer?
I agree with that. I think, go ahead, Cole.
No, go ahead, Chelsea.
Sorry, I'm a talker, as you can see as well, and that's why I'm a CSM. But I think just be as upfront and honest with your manager of like this, like Andrew was saying, this is not how the client wants to communicate. It can cause a bigger issue down the line, and just keeping that communication line open with your manager, I think, is the biggest key with that. But knowing your client and give a reason too. If it's just like, well, I've just never talked to them on the phone, like that's not really a reason. That's more of like a personal preference. But if it's something that your client really just doesn't respond to, then that's a reason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
The big thing is finding value, right? And if there's not value for that client and internal to be having consistent meetings like that, what's the use to have a call? It's just a glorified check-in. Everybody's very busy. Having calls that don't bring value are not worth having. So in saying that, the managers are sometimes not involved, as involved as you are. So you have some insights you can share with them. It may not be a malicious thing that they want you to be more involved with that client. It's just sharing the feedback that you have from the client. Say, hey, listen, this is what I think, based on what the client has said. And you can have that dialogue internally and ensure that what you move forward with doing is bringing value.
Yeah, if your communications plan for your customers is based off of checking a box for your manager, you're not doing it right.
Mm.
I agree with that.
I think another thing, invite your manager to the call. Nobody likes an idea like their own idea,
Right.
Have your manager say, I'd love if you sit in on this call and go through the cadence discussion. And your manager, if the client says, no, I want to meet this amount of times, and your manager says, well, we're going to go against what they say, that's crazy. And they probably won't. So, let it be their idea to be like, you know what, actually, I think we should move them to a lower cadence because they want that. Sometimes that's the little push it takes. I think it can be very challenging sometimes, maneuvering office politics, if you will. So have it be their idea, CSM them.
Actually,
Yes.
what's a strategy I've used previously was when a manager wanted me to do something similar in nature. I had this knack of building really good relationships with my customers, and so I had a real friendly that I had talked about this policy with, who thought it was asinine. So I invited my manager to the next meeting, and that was supposed to be just a checkbox, and actually had that friendly explain to my manager in no uncertain terms how ridiculous that policy was. So there's nothing better than having it come straight from a customer.
Mm-hmm.
And your manager doesn't, you're not going to tell your manager that you prepped them, right? This is, they don't know your customer like you do. So
Exactly.
Awesome. All right, one last question, which is a technical question, and then we'll close things out here. Audio setup question. Do you default to computer speakers versus headphones? I've had issues with both Bluetooth headphones from Jabra and default computer audio and Echo. Any of you? I have a whole audio setup with I got a Rode for podcasting, all that stuff, so I don't have that problem personally anymore. Any of you have any recommendations?
I love my AirPods.
You what?
Yeah, I love my AirPods.
Oh yeah, you have your AirPods in. Okay.
I do have my AirPods. I can hear better. I feel like my audio sounds better to my clients. I can cancel out the noise if I need to, like when my kids are home or something. So I really have loved my AirPods. I've tried like bigger headphones. The only thing I really haven't tried though is like the actual mic, which I think would be nice if I was doing podcasts more often. But my AirPods, I feel like have worked really well for me.
Yeah, the one problem with the mic is that because I run this through a podcast board, I love my AirPods. I can't use my AirPods with it, or at least I haven't figured out a way to. Corinne?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't even know if I should respond because I never use headphones. I always just kind of use my laptop speaker, or I'll connect it to a speaker. Partly I just don't like my headphones because they mess up my hair. No, I'm just kidding. As you can see, I'm already going back to factory reset right now in this heat. So I think that you should use what works best for you, what you feel most comfortable with. If you're going to be like fretting that you're not connected to the right thing, use your laptop, use whatever literally just works best for you, what you can hear the best for. People have all different types of like accessibility needs. I think go with what works best for you. And if you get a lot of feedback, like we can't hear you, address it, and test it out, with your coworkers or friends or whatever. But yeah, I typically like right now I'm just using my Mac. So,
well, 50% of this panel is using headphones. So Cole, our last one had headphones, but yeah, AirPods or something equivalent. So Cole, last speaker on this. You got anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's just a comfort thing, right? For me, there's construction going outside my building, so I appreciate, and I'm sure everybody else appreciates me wearing the noise canceling headphones so you don't have to hear it. But yeah, it's a comfort thing for sure. Do what's
Adam
best for
asks
you.
if those are Jabras. Cool.
Mine are Monster.
Monster. Okay, awesome.
I do
All
like
right.
Jacquard though. Jacquard's great.
We've come to the end of our time together today, and I wanted to say how awesome our conversation has been. But hey, what matters most is not what I think; it's what all you think. So I kindly ask you to share your valuable feedback on LinkedIn, tagging me, our guests, or Success Hacker, Success Coaching. Big thank you to my amazing panelists for generously sharing their thoughts, ideas, insights, best practices. Let me leave you with this thought. Exceptional customer success managers understand they don't have all the answers, but they sure know where to find them. That's why we've created the CSM Mastermind to tap into the collective knowledge and experience of our community to support everyone's growth. Remember to sign up, mark your calendar for our next event on July 17th, when we'll talk about aligning and managing expectations. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your week and month. See you soon.